Welcome back to the Daily Drum on WHUR and Sirius XM Channel 141. This is a truncated edition of the Insight segment for Wednesday, April 30th. I'm Harold Fisher. D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser and the Washington Commanders strike a multi-billion-dollar stadium deal. The Shadeur Sanders NFL draft controversy continues, and ESPN sports analyst Shannon Sharpe is sued and accused of sexual assault by a woman he started a relationship with when she was just 19 years old. Yes, we're at the sports roundtable tonight. My guests are Kelsey Nicole Nelson, former Washington football team host and professor of sports media at George Washington University, and sports columnist Darren Snyder. Thank you all for joining the conversation. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.
Sure thing. Let us first start with the stadium deal. Biggest business deal for the District of Columbia in its history. I want to talk specifically about the sports angle. RFK Stadium has been sitting like a ghost, falling apart on 180 acres, Kelsey. But from a sports perspective, do you like the deal? Do you not? What do you think?
Well, first off, I mean, it's exciting times in Washington right now, right? I just want to acknowledge that. It's great to see all the joy around town. I personally love it, right? Born and bred here in the DMV area. And I really think that DC should be seen as a sports capital. And I think DC is a football town. So bringing football back to Washington, I think this is the conversation happening right now, Harold. Folks who are from here, I think they love it. I think it's more so the folks who aren't from here as much kind of having the differing opinions and views. And obviously money is always going to be involved in the conversation. But, we think about, I've been doing a lot of interviews this week with FIFA, right? FIFA Club World Cup is coming here to Washington, D.C. You think about an international realm. So I think even beyond football, right? Even beyond potentially bringing back the burgundy and gold once that, city council decision is made, you can think about larger sporting events coming here. We know the mayor has, tried to get larger sporting events to come to Washington, D.C. So I think the possibilities are endless and open. And I also think this is helping to bridge a generational gap and guide. I think folks, my age and younger, they only have heard about, the stadium rocking and, the gridiron greats that played there. But now I think they potentially have a chance to experience and see it in a whole new way. And I think delivering the news at the National Press Club, Harold, one of the most, important venues for journalists, especially at a time like now when we're talking about journalism in so many different ways. I also thought that was just a great place to do it. Roger Goodell coming back, Josh Harris, everybody on that stage having ties to the area, knowing what football means here. I just thought all in all, it was great. And it's a true national conversation and talking point for anybody that loves the game of football.
Darren, what do you think? 5 years, $3.8 billion from what we've heard about this deal and the benefits, the economic benefits for DC. Does it get a thumbs up or a thumbs down for you?
Well, you asked Kelsey, about the sports angle from it.
Right.
It's a slam dunk. It's a slam dunk from the sports angle. The sports angle doesn't care about anything else except how beautiful is this venue and how many events can we put in it. And look at all these cool suites and restaurants and all of this development around this venue. This is very exciting. From a sports angle, who cares about anything else? The rest of it is like, how much is this costing? What else is involved in this deal? How the people who live here being impacted and what are they getting out of it? Is this the best use of the money? Is this the best use of the land? So it's clearly a different question. And generally speaking, these things are never good for the people, generally speaking.
Why do you say
it's
that?
good for the small percentage of people who go to the games. It's not a lot of people go to the games. It's good for the owners. It's good for some of the businesses that get in there, but for the majority of the people, it's not good for them overall. Now they get a certain sense of civic pride when sports do well and teams are winning and everyone's on board, but they're paying the bill and not getting much benefit out of it. And these sports owners are so used to getting their palaces paid for that we're supposed to be excited that the city's only paying 1.1 billion,
Yeah.
So it's something to consider. Maybe we can get that number down some, But it's exciting overall, but it is a bill that comes with it.
We're going to have to continue to watch this, particularly, Kelsey said, when it's passed by the council. Certainly that is not a guarantee. But, Kelsey, it's almost like, how can you say no?
Right. And we know 4 council members, right? We're at the actual announcement. So we know there is some support, but also as soon as it was made, almost immediately on social media, I saw all the, naysayers essentially getting online and saying exactly what Darren was saying, right? The money, the cost, the traffic. And this is going to happen anytime a stadium is built, right? I was in Inglewood when SoFi was built and have seen what it's done to that community right around, but also the same conversation was happening there. I've actually talked to mayors, Harold, that have went through this process in their cities. One of my mentors is Mark Morial, former mayor of New Orleans, and obviously helping with the Saints, there as well. But I think the timing one is interesting, right? We're coming off a season that the Commanders had one of the best seasons, right, in history, right, under Jaden Daniels. There's so much hype around this team. This is a team that's being talked about. Just short, right, of a Super Bowl. So all that to say, I think the timing is interesting, Harold. Anytime you have these deals, there's going to be people who aren't happy, right? I mean, that's just sports in general. If you look at mine and Darren's mentions, there's always some people who aren't happy about something, right? But I think the larger picture is DC, again, wanting to be seen as a city that has one of the top most valuable franchises in football. And as the mayor said, back home, opening that. And also, as she alluded to, something that she had made a promise to people, right? She opened her press conference with promise made and the audience responding, promise kept. So I think it's one of her initiatives. And also, if we're looking at it, her being a Black mayor of a city like Washington, D.C., and what she's done in her 10-year tenure, after keeping, right, the Capitals and Wizards here, that was one that scared some folks. Because I think the other side of it, as we talk about money, those businesses, right, the revitalization that's happening in DC that we're all witnessing, as new money comes in. Yes, you want to talk about who it's going to, but also, what will this do for DC with more folks coming in, right? With venues, right? We're all talking about the Cowboy Carter tour right now in the music scene. Could this be a potential?
We are. Darren, I've been talking about the Cowboy Carter thing all week.
Outside of sports, but that's what I'm saying. It's like it can lead to larger conversations in Washington. But again, there's some council members who are standing firm on saying no. So I think it's going to be a lot of political work for this to actually.
I think it's time for negotiation. They might not be saying let's talk about these terms. But anytime you start talking about venues, I need
to move on real quick. Go ahead, finish your point.
Anytime you start talking about venues in DC, you always got to be careful to not mix up arenas and stadiums, especially football stadiums. Baseball stadiums, a different story. 81 dates a year. Football stadium, not a lot of activity. So that's all.
Let's talk about the Shadeur Sanders thing, and I'll start with you, Darren, because the latest news that came down today is that there were fines levied against the Atlanta Falcons, as well as one of the players where this prank was played against him during the tour. I don't want to get kind of bogged down so much in the details of what has happened, but Darren, help me with this Shadeur Sanders thing. Is this race? Is this attitude? Is it about his father? Why was this such a problem?
Well, it's multi-layered. It's not a simple black-white issue, in my opinion. It has a lot to do with even prospects, college football prospects, quarterbacks. Lots of quarterbacks have had great college careers and didn't amount to much in the NFL. Keep that in mind, okay? It has a lot to do with his name, his hype. He's a superstar in college because of his name, his celebrity, right? And he has a certain persona. He carries himself like a superstar. Like an elite talent, an elite superstar. Keep that in mind. All the evaluation about him did not say he was elite. Some of the early projections had him very high, but the closer we got to the draft, more evaluators looked more closely, and some had him in the first round, some had him in the second or third round. Okay. And then during the interview process, it is important to note that people do want to like you. And it's also important to note that oftentimes we don't like people who carry themselves as, let's just say, superstars, divas, so to speak. I'm not saying he is, but let's just acknowledge that we don't like people who carry themselves as divas. However, if you're elite, we don't care. So you put all of that together, his name, what people might fear that will bring, his evaluation, his celebrity, and the draft being teams got like 7 shots to pick players, and it's all in there. It's not one thing over another to me. So he wasn't taken in the first round. After that, he just started dropping momentum.
Well, and I watched most of it. I know you all would be surprised that I did, but I did. And
I don't know why, but
well,
I'm just kidding. Go ahead.
No, listen, I was curious. My intellectual curiosity came along, and probably because of what we saw with the Commanders, who knows? But the thing, Kelsey, that really surprised me was that all of these the commentary that we saw on social media and saying that this was racism and because Shadeur Sanders is Black, I'm just going to tell you, just from an outsider's point of view, I didn't see a whole lot of white guys getting drafted this year. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but whether it was a Cam Ward from number 1 all the way through, this was a blackety black draft. You had 5, 6, 7, 8 guys getting drafted, Black guys, and then here's a white guy, and then you had another 5 or 4. Here's a white guy. I mean, what am I missing here, Kelsey?
I mean, well, one, I want to acknowledge, Harold, you said something that the NFL is proud of right now is that you watched the draft. And right now we know the draft, and largely being tied to Shadeur Sanders, had historic numbers. We're seeing numbers in rounds 2 and 3. Most people watch the first day and then I'm good. They're good on it, right? But the NFL saw numbers that we haven't seen since COVID 2020. And remember why people were watching it during COVID, right? We were all stuck inside, right? Whether you wanted to watch football or not, somehow, some way, it was a conversation. So I think that was huge. But again, everyone kind of watching when would Shadeur Sanders get picked, to what Darren said, right? His celebrity, his stature. He also brought a lot of people into college football, right? I mean, not many people were watching Colorado football, right? Outside of the college football norms. I mean, I've talked to so many people who wanted to watch because of what was being built there. You can also look back at what Shadeur did at Jackson State as well, right? And have that conversation as well. I think to what you said, I think we have to remember the National Football League is predominantly Black, right? So the players coming in there, right, are largely more than not going to be that. I do think we saw white players getting drafted higher, but I think the conversation was going into this draft, we knew there was a lot of conversation about, okay, not a lot of big quarterback talent, right? Everybody was kind of sold on Cam Ward. You can go back to the conversation about Shadeur and wanting to throw or not to throw at the combine. You can think about his pro day and really wanting to, thinking back to also his past conversations about wanting to focus on the interview realm. We've heard GMs come out about the interview realm, and that's also something that, we talk about. And then again, all eyes were pretty much on him. And, people talked about teams that they know needed quarterbacks, right? It's a quarterback-driven league. And everyone, again, just saying, how was he slipping down? When you look at his numbers, he had solid numbers throughout his college football campaign. Now,
I watched that too. Be surprised. I watched the Colorado Buffaloes.
Yeah,
that's a historic moment for Harold Fisher.
And see, that's what I'm saying. So he did that, but I think what we have to acknowledge is the guys coming out of college now, because of NIL, because of social media, their celebrity status, I think, is on a level that we just haven't seen before, right? Unprecedented. And Shadeur Sanders had done that, right? He essentially did what his father did, but in the new generation that we live in. And I think there are some folks, and GMs will tell you, oh, well, we look at the whole person, when we want to bring a player in, right? They'll talk about a player fitting into their culture of the football organization. But at the end of the day, how the GMs are keeping their jobs is because they have to win, Harold. So essentially, who could bring Shadeur in to win. The Browns are a franchise that need to win. It's a franchise that has been on paper where their owner has even talked about their quarterback on paper who was supposed to be starting for them, Deshaun Watson, kind of saying we got it wrong. And so this is an organization, again, that's trying to rebuild and restart. But already their top posts, Harold, have been from Shadeur Sanders. They have gained more social media followers from Shadeur Sanders. More people are going to be watching Browns games. I think Darren is right. It's multifaceted. It's multi-layered. But I don't think we can take away him being a Black quarterback. You just can't separate that, from the conversation happening around him. But I do think there were other factors that parlayed into him being a fifth round pick, because otherwise, Harold, you're not calling me and Darren to talk about a 144 pick to come on HUR and lead, one of the top shows on WHUR. But again, I think we just have to acknowledge now, like, it's going to be on him to obviously prove why he should have been picked higher. Also, I mean, his celebrity is why we're talking about the prank calls. His celebrity is why, even though there were other players prank called, Shadeur and the fines, right? And now a young man who did it, calls his father to be fined and an organization and the Atlanta Falcons, to be fined. So I think all that is being tied to his celebrity and how people portray him. But, I think something was said important on draft night that Nick Saban said, and sometimes people can create a perception or reputation about you that's not true. And I do think we need to acknowledge that many people who are judging Shadeur Sanders have never even had a conversation with that young man.
How about that? Yeah, I think that's an excellent point. Real quick, Darren, on the last point on Shadeur Sanders. Is there a lesson for him in this?
The lesson could be to have a better sense of how much leverage you have. Of course, again, the early prognosis was like he could be like the first pick in the draft, whatever. But the closest we got to the process, there were more questions, right? So to carry yourself like, I'm going to determine where I want to go. I'm going to change the culture, to carry yourself like that and not be, there's no doubt that you like the number one quarterback off the board, the number one pick. You might want to be a little more humble. And so people talk about, be yourself. Okay, be yourself. But also realize that, the way you come off has to match what you're offering. Like his dad could do it because people's going to take his dad no matter what. He was an elite prospect. Cam, what's his name? Cam Newton, he could do it, right? Coming out of Auburn because he was an elite prospect. And, no shade to Shadeur, he's not an elite prospect. He doesn't have the elite characteristics. So people got to nitpick a little bit more on that. And then if the personality seems like you might not be cool being a backup, yeah. So that could turn people off. It's a fact.
Yeah. Let's talk about Shannon Sharpe. Kelsey, I'll let you start on this one. Yeah, it's a whole thing. Obviously, last week he released a statement that he's stepping down to spend more time with his family. Well, we know what that means after this young woman who is now 21, but she was 19 when he met her. He said that they had a 100% consensual relationship. She is accusing him of raping her 3 times over the past several months. Met at a gym in Los Angeles. Oh, I forgot. She's also suing him for $50 million. From a woman's perspective, tell the truth and shame the devil. Kelsey, what do you think about this?
Harold, I'm going to say from a human perspective, and this is the one I probably haven't really commented on social media because of the legal ramifications.
That's why I called you.
Which is why people should be careful about what you say on social media when it comes to legal status. But I will say, it's unfortunate. I think Shannon Sharpe has quickly become one of the most liked media personalities. And you can tell by his podcast numbers, by him joining First Take, continuing to be a show. I think there's a lot of things here. One, we have to remember he works for a Walt Disney company, right? Draft was shown on a Walt Disney company network. ESPN obviously owned by ABC and all that. But I think the biggest things when it first came out, Harold, I think the conversation has shifted. First, it went to immediately everybody saying, it's just a money grab because we heard the rumors of how much his podcast was worth. But then as evidence, as you can say, has been coming out, I think people are really shifting and like, oh man, like Shannon Sharpe, this isn't looking good, right? I mean, what's been dropped, honestly, it's been scary. I mean, just to hear, this young woman's voice. And I feel like people think they know Shannon Sharpe, right? Again, from kind of outside looking in. So I think it was more surprising to people, because he's had conversations about this with celebrities on his podcast about dating younger women, and what that looks like. But again, I think it's troubling, I would say, is the word. The more evidence that comes out, and then, kind of Shannon, like you said, stepping away now, that's when it's serious, when you have to step away from your job. And so all in all to say, I hope it gets worked out. There's so much in this case. There's, the different states that they're saying that this happened in. Like you said, there was the actual accusations that it says it happened in, and then the monetary aspect, right? And then just the mental health for both parties, right, involved in this case, because this has become so public and so large. So all in all, I hope it gets settled. But I hope this is a lesson to everyone. Like, you have to pick your partner, your person, whoever you're dealing with. You just have to pick them carefully, because the other big news right now is Bill Belichick. And obviously not to this point, not to this legal status, but he's also being talked about because of who he's dating. So I think the larger thing is, what do you want people to focus on? For Shannon, you would think it's his career and, what he's doing and what he's been able to build since stepping off the football field. So I feel for his family, right? His brother's name is being thrown into this too. But Shannon Sharpe, I just would say, I think everyone's just kind of thinking, like, you just got to make better decisions in your personal life, because your personal life has been a topic of conversation.
And Darren, let me just say, from a man's point of view, I mean, is she an adult? If he met her at 19, yes. But from, if he met her at 54 and she was 19, I can just hear in my head, don't do it. Don't do it. And to Kelsey's point about, Bill Belichick, his partner, she's 24. He's, I don't know how old he is. He's up there.
70.
Yeah. But they're also public. I mean, they were on CBS Sunday Morning. But, I'll let you finish up here, Darren, and, with these last 3 minutes.
Part of me is like, and this is wrong. I'll admit this is wrong. Part of me is like, you shouldn't be messing with her anyway.
Like I said,
she was 19, 21, right? So that's part of where I come from. Maybe I'm old school. I believe that's an inappropriate relationship, even though it's legal. So
right,
he very well could have done what she said he's done. I mean, it's not like there's no way that he did it. Yeah, it's very possible. And like Kelsey said, it's unfortunate from the human side. The victims of abuse and assault, every time these cases come up, they got to go through it, what they remember and what they might have heard. And, we hear, it's a money grab, and it's possible that, it's not what she said, but just the whole thought of it is disturbing. It's troubling. And, we'll see what the courts say. Unfortunately, a lot of these cases, apparently she has some video. I haven't seen any video. Sound like you might have seen some video, Kelsey.
I did it, but that's what I know Shannon Sharpe made the statement about, right? The video leaking, and he asked her to release the whole video.
Yeah, I know he said that. Like, and to me, that is important too, because the whole one might add some, without having seen anything, the whole one should add some context. Instead of selectively editing. I don't even want to think about what they're doing, right? But anyway, then she has the lawyer who's known for these types of cases, which can be polarizing. People accuse him of being sort of like a money grab, ambulance chasing lawyer. But again, that doesn't mean what she's saying is not true.
That's right.
So we just gotta figure it out,
Yeah, but I mean,
I was just saying, Harold, to be fair too, like, remember, Shannon Sharpe had gotten in trouble earlier. Was it last year with the leaked sex tape on Instagram Live?
With Michelle.
Right. So there's been some troubling things that have happened in Shannon's background, and more is being pushed to the front. But I would just say people have to look at both sides, and you have to look beyond the person. But again, it's troubling when a young woman, the fact is that he admitted he had a relationship with her, right? So we can't take that away. People make their own personal choices. But again, you just have to protect who is in your space, because obviously it seems like there's a lot of evidence that built up, a lot of recordings. And so it kind of just makes you think, when did this really become an instance, right? That there's, again, so much, seems like there's so much there. So I think for Shannon, right, I don't know, his legal team is going to have to do a lot to try to prove that it was a consensual relationship.
Good luck to both of them. Hopefully it works out where, this can be solved. Gotta go. Kelsey Nicole Nelson, Darren Snyder, thank you both so much. That is the Daily Drum for this Wednesday, April 30th. The Original Quiet Storm with Raheem Devon is next on WHUR. I'm Harold Fisher. Good night.